Bernhard Pucher, and welcome to CenterFrame Interview, where we interview fantastic filmmakers from all around the world. Today, I've got a really special guest. Her name is Nomawonga Khumalo, and she's from South Africa, and she's recently screened her short film, Five Tiger, at the Sundance Film Festival. Thank you very, very much for joining me here at CenterFrame Interview, and you've also recently become a CenterFrame member, which I'm very, very happy to announce here on the show. We've not actually said it anywhere else yet. So thank you very much for joining us and for believing in this whole thing. But let's get started with your film and you and what you do. So Khumalo, tell me about how you got started. South Africa isn't necessarily known for having a big industry. So what was the inspiration that got you going to want to get into filmmaking, into storytelling, and where did it all start for you?
When I usually tell the story, I'd like to lead with the fact that my involvement in the film industry was quite fated. I was a struggling student. South Africa has really high fees. And so there are so many barriers to an education. So if you've managed to sort your fees out, you still need to get money for notes, and you basically are buying different, the different steps to achieving your education. So with those barriers that are there, I set out to do some weekend jobs and a part-time job. And just luckily, a friend of mine was working as a tutor in the film industry. Under a company called Education on Location, I became a tutor once or twice a week on some commercials, and eventually I landed a feature. It was an international feature where I was to be one of the leads, the young leads as tutor. And what that did for me was it enabled me to have an outsider's view of what this industry was about, but not being too involved in the process of filmmaking, but at the same time within the close proximity where I could learn and I could observe. And I was taken. I mean, I come from a very theoretical background. I was doing philosophy and I had a sociology major. So the way to interpreting and understanding the world around me was purely of argument. It was, purely from theory. And here we were looking at something that was so active and that dwelled in the materialization of things that had come from that theory. But at the same time, it became an industry on its own. It became, and I viewed it quite poetically, it was very hands-on. And so I got taken by the technical aspect of filmmaking. And I mean, seeing the very few Black women that were in the camera department at that time, or in grips department, or in the lighting department, kind of created an intrigue. I wanted to do something that not other people were doing. And I visited a couple of times on set as a childminder, and I kind of came to stay. So a bunch of years later, and I mean, this must have been about 11, 12 years ago, I found that I have been able to penetrate the technical department. So I've worked in the camera department for films like the Danish Western, The Salvation, starring Eva Green and Mads Mikkelsen. That was quite a huge and quite a profound step in my career, because I came on with that team as a trainee, but what I saw inspired me to tell bigger stories, because at that time, I mean, I was working on commercials, which were very contained. And I mean, commercials are quite elaborate. They've got this huge setup, they've got really lovely budgets, but as far as storytelling went and using the devices that we have, I mean, I remember finding out that you could shoot day for night, and that for me was an eye-opener at the time when we did it on The Salvation. Most of that film took place at night, but we didn't have a single time, where we actually did a night shoot. And so understanding what we could do with the tech to aid our storytelling just kind of wanted me to learn more. So after getting into the technical department, I got the opportunity to enter the storytelling department, and I started as a script supervisor. And what this allowed me to do was work next to some really awesome directors, both locally and internationally. Just get into their brains and find out what their reasoning was and how they saw story and how they used the tools that were available to them in order to tell them that story. Now, I find that I've kind of reached a bit of a full circle moment, especially with my debut feature, Five Tiger, which allowed me to then take the things that I was originally interested in, philosophy and sociology, being the order and the system of society, how we see ourselves within the world and how we see other people, the cosmology of, who we are, where we come from, and our understanding of who we are in the world. So to be able to place all these things, my interest in spirituality, my excitement and my, I suppose, a keen attitude towards really tackling social justice, coupling that with technical storytelling and creative storytelling. Yeah, it's been a wonderful learning journey that I could not have predicted that my life would have turned out this way, even if I had a crystal ball in front of me. Like there was, yeah, like no way, like how things just happened and how they've actually fed, all these tributaries fed towards the great stream of the things I wanted to do in the world. And my interest in the media comes from the power that the media has, the ability to reach so many people and the kind of impact it can have if used in the right way.
You mentioned the industry and black women in the industry in South Africa. What is the South African film industry like? What sort of, is it like here where I'm assuming it's primarily men, but what's the racial makeup of the South African film industry? Is it mixed or is it very one-sided? And I would love to hear more about that because this is not something that we sort of get to see much here in London.
Well, there's two ways in which we can understand the local film industry. And I mean, the one is pure demographic, right? Black people are the majority. So as much as, the industry started as being, quite like racially unequal, we have now started finding movement that that offsets, that are a lot more inclusive. Also, the government has a lot to do with that, with regards to the kind of businesses that are being supported, as well as the tax rebate system. Just in our BEE policies, which have a lot to do with affirmative action, as well as restructuring, the powers and the modes of production when it comes to the film industry. So, that started taking place a good, 5, maybe 10 years ago in the industry. So that transformation is something that you can see. Also, the access to the film industry has broadened. So you've got a lot more a diverse group of students and emerging filmmakers that are coming to the fore. The use of technology as well made it much cheaper to shoot. So if you have a cell phone and you've got a camera, or you've got a little, you've got a little DSLR camera, you're able to create content without having the barriers that existed of needing to firstly have the money and the capital to buy film, rent, huge, bits of equipment. And so all these things that created financial barriers are now falling away. Also, you've got the rise of TikTok now, which puts creation in the palms of a lot of people. And so whether it's just story times or informative video, the kind of content creation means that the access to the film industry has been opened, right? There's a lot more that we can do, and there's a lot more that I'm doing, particularly within the tech space, looking at how technology can really unlock value for the arts by solving some of these issues like emerging filmmakers not having the right business skills to be able to sustain themselves in the industry, or not accessing the international market, or rather having ease of access to the international market, which speaks to their social capital, but also how they're linked to distributors and sales agents, so they know what the path of their films are. They can plan better with regards to remuneration. All these things are up in the air, but we're experiencing a huge wave of transformation, right? Which brings me to the second way we can look at the industry. Now, when you're talking about the population of the industry in general, demographically, we can say it is becoming majority Black. I don't have the experience of filmmaking in Cape Town. I'm Joburg based, and what I speak of reflects on the environment that I'm in. So in Joburg, you find that there is, there's equality and there's transformation that is visible. But now if we're starting to talk about equity and we're starting to talk about like who owns the means of production when it comes to the film value chain, that still is very much, that's a place that we can improve upon when it comes to transformation. And it is systematic, but it is also embedded in our education, how we understand business and the arts, how we can merge creativity with enterprise. And so we're looking, I suppose, collectively at ways to try and take the film industry out of the silo that it exists in, because we don't work with other kids. For some reason, we are so we're pretty closed off. So in order for us to start expanding, we are going to have to start looking at how do we, how do we work with business? How do we work with HR? How do we work with, and how do we involve other members of the arts fraternity? But yeah, so a little bit, still a little bit skewed with regards to ownership, but we are making moves in the right direction.
That's really great to hear. It's improvement is always a good thing, even if it's incremental sometimes, as long as it's going somewhere and it's not stagnant or backwards, right? How does that reflect on how you got to make your film? How was your process, and did your film benefit from these changes yet, or have you still faced quite a bit of an uphill battle in that regard?
So Five Tiger is a proof of concept for a film that I had in development. And because it's still in development, I'm not going to talk too much about it. But what we wanted to do is we wanted to create a template just with regards to the kind of film it would become and the themes that it would speak to, right? There is, especially after the Me Too movement, there has been a call for us to be able to really take a look at some of our industry practices, particularly with regards to our storytelling. So it was both a proof of concept and it was an experimental way to see if we could tell an engaging story without resorting to violence, without resorting to explicit sex, without resorting to hysteria, I think, on screen. And I mean, this goes towards my personal, the film reflects what I think of the world and what I think should be out there. And so we have a lot of content, particularly in South Africa, that quite explicitly shows violence, against the Black female body. And this is in our soapies, this is in our dramas. And the reality of it is that we have a very high gender-based violence rate, and we have, I think, the world's highest femicide rate. So to engage in a story where a woman is abused and not resort to those tropes of having having a woman be hysterical or be taken advantage of on screen, were just also some of the nuances we wanted to play with regards to Five Tiger. And we found that in implicitly showing her pain, we shone a light on the culture of silence. That, we have certain sayings in our cultures that allude to a woman needing to be the stronger one in the relationship. So the one is a woman holds the sharp side of the knife. And the other one is, after the, it speaks more towards the uprising where women stood up and protested against, carrying passes. And the term for that is imbokodo, which is a rock. You strike a woman, you strike a rock. So the narrative around women being these hard objects that should be impenetrable and the world shouldn't affect them was something that we didn't want to continue to indulge in because it is harmful. So when it came to looking at Five Tiger, we wanted to create something that would still speak to and not ignore the pain, but to try and do it in a different way, right? So with regards to how we got to make the film, we needed to find a different way to do it because the story conventions exist. For instance, if you would apply to particular funding bodies, there are certain conventions that want to take place that, for instance, if you're looking at a 3-act structure, your story must exist within this framework. And we get it at this point in time because our funding bodies are looking at a huge mandate trying to service the entire industry. And so what that does is it leaves very little space for innovation or for trying to do things differently, right? So we really wanted to be able to control the narrative the way we wanted it to. And we wanted to be as experimental as we were with regards to how we use language and, the structure of the story, taking or choosing a slice of life approach as opposed to a resolution, a nice, neatly wrapped ending towards the film. So between my producers and myself, we funded the films ourselves. And then also just the context, leverage context that my producers had with regards to the score, with regards to the grade. And it all came together by the grace of wonderful people who came to our aid and saw the vision that we were trying to that we were trying to live up to.
Can I ask how much you spent, or is that more of a? Because I'd love to hear how much you spent on your film, because it's obviously different in every country what budgets mean, you know. So I was curious how much you spent on your film.
Just doing the conversions, we spent 40,000 rand, and to 40,000 rands in pounds is how much? Just around 2,000 pounds.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's a very low budget. That's a really low budget. Like it's like trying to make a film for £2,000 here pretty much means you're filming in your house and you're maybe, you know, paying for food, and that's about it.
Yeah, it does. I mean, we had wonderful collaboration from Panavision, who were able to give us the most beautiful anamorphics, and with people like Dave Wrightstra, who's our colorist, Mark Killian, who was the composer. We really had like wonderful people coming on. We saw the vision, and we were able to provide a whole sea of fish just with one or two.
Nice.
And that's the beauty of creation, right? And that's the beauty of creation, where you have the right relationships and, people see what vision you're going for, and you accept that collaboration. You can come up with something that's quite remarkable.
That's an interesting point you're bringing up about collaboration. What is your creative environment like? Like, how do you develop a story? Do you have a process you like to go through when you're developing a story? How many non-filmmakers do you include in that? I'd love to hear more about that.
Well, how do I put this? There isn't only one. In my evolution, I try to find a way to not just streamline, but to find a way that works best for me with regards to my story development. So at this point in my career, it changes all the time depending on the story that I'm researching or investigating. I'm a big believer in research, and I think that when it comes to tackling some of the lesser told stories, so stories that lean into the lesser seen sort of South African, perhaps Black experience, or South African rural experience, or taking on culture, involvement in involving stakeholders and reaching out to custodians. And our knowledge doesn't only lie in books, which makes it a little bit tricky sometimes and a bit daunting, particularly if you're trying to tell stories that have a lot to do with religion or culture. Our history is still very much embedded in the oral retelling. So you'll find that different people in different communities have been tasked with being the custodians of particular stories, or they bear the stories for the generations after. And these people aren't always easy to find, but if you ask the right question, if you dare to have an inquisitive mind, you are surely led to the answers. And how you tell a story is also as fated as who you come across on the path of telling that story. But once you've come up with a framework, and once you've got like an initial idea, it becomes a nudge, right? So the idea begins to grow legs and starts to develop a brain and a heart and some skin, and before you know it, it becomes a fully fledged person. But I guess what I try not to do is run with the arrogance of thinking or assuming that the story lies with me and the story cannot change, because I think the issue is narratives that don't change, and we hold on so dearly to what we wanted doesn't allow for divine intervention, if I can put it like that. And why I say that, let me take it a little bit back. So when you really research African storytelling, be it through musicality or through the narratives themselves, you realize that there isn't a fixed modality when it comes to how the story is conveyed or portrayed. So if it's a story that exists within a particular song or a hymn, how we sing it today is not going to be how we sing it tomorrow. So we're not fitted to confine a particular genre or, certain conventions. When it comes to our tonality, there isn't only a major and a minor and a dominant. There is a plurality in how we tell the story. There is an interesting collaboration that we have with audiences. So if we're at my house and we're singing a particular song and we sing the same song and we're visiting you, the songs don't sound the same. So the story progresses, and how the story is told very much depends on the environment. And so we look at that as leaving space for the divine, right? So in our storytelling, we always need to be cognitive of the space that we leave for the divine by not necessarily sticking to this one idea that we have, but allowing others to become collaborators with you. And you do that through research. You do that through asking. You do that through talking. And it's like the tighter you hold on to an idea, I mean, there's only so much you can do, but allow the story to give back to you, to give you its gifts, to tell you what it wants to ultimately achieve. And you'll find that you have a story that connects with a lot more people. By happenstance, and whether we look at it as a form of spirituality that dwells on how well the story does, or just the empirical evidence that two brains are better than one. There's always a benefit in collaboration.
As a Black woman, what have, through your research, other Black women taught you about being a Black woman?
That's a tricky one, because the Black feminine experience is not monolithic, right? So we all it has its many fragmentations. So we face different challenges, and I guess if there's anything to take away from it all, is the fact that the one isn't representative of the all, and the all isn't representative of the one necessarily. We go through different things, and I think the point is never to be perfect, right? So the point is never to be politically correct, or to have the right frame of mind, or to see things in a particular way. The point is to be malleable and ductile enough that when you encounter particular information, that knowledge can change you, and that knowledge can alter who you are and where you stand. So for instance, I mean, some of the challenges that I have had are not primarily or only because I'm a Black woman. They're because I started as a childminder. And so to try and change people's perception of me as this Mary Poppins, nanny, Haga, and moving into the technical department where people need to trust me with a Zeiss Master Prime with these hands that have been known to wipe snot and give snacks, that was difficult, right? But I wouldn't say that experience is exclusive to me being a Black. It could be. I don't know any better, right? But what it is that everyone goes through their challenges. And so the point is never to be perfect. The point is to be able to change your views and change your stance once you've noticed that a certain mindset isn't working for you, once you've noticed that a certain approach, an ideology, a way of thinking, a way of seeing things, once you've noticed that it's not the right one, to not be afraid to change your stance and go, okay, how can I continue to be better? Yeah.
That's really, thank you for answering that, because I was really worried about asking that question. It's one of those things, because it's a different, like, talking about race is always difficult, and certainly, as sort of this white European man, the question of race in cinema has always been a very tricky one to navigate without having, my own bias, and without having to deal with having to come to terms with other people's biases, and how do you square that circle? And I love your answer about this is not about being perfect. It's about understanding. It's about accepting knowledge, and that knowledge might change you. That's really, really fantastic. I love that.
Where we run into issues is when the assumption of knowledge prevents that natural change, right? So these are some of we run into some technical difficulties when, because you assume that somebody's struggle, or the world exists in this way, that becomes, that becomes the status quo until. And what often happens is people then fight hard to protect that, to protect their beliefs, to protect what they understand or what they see, to protect their own biases. But research isn't about going to all the sources that confirm your biases. That's not what that's about. Research is about being with people that don't, you don't necessarily agree with, and go, how do you see it? And then still go, actually, I still see it the way I see it, right? But to have that open-mindedness to be able to listen and ask, and if your point of view is found wanting, to be willing to change.
When it comes to your journey through the filmmaking industry, where do you have a moment you remember where you may want to have given it up, or where you thought, this is hopeless, this is not going to change? Is there anything that you can recall in your time where you thought that might be the case? And it would be great to hear from you what those experiences were.
There's a few.
There's a few. Okay, well, give me a couple good ones then. I want to hear.
The first one, I guess, is when, and this was etched into my memory. I was a production assistant, and I had just gotten my driver's license, and so I was used to driving my mom's little car from home to the shops, and I was like used to driving my dad's car, but it would never be for great distances, and the only passengers I had were like my friends and family. And so I got hired on this job that traveled, and it traveled through all different provinces, and it was maybe a total of about 3,000 kilometers in total.
My gosh. Wow.
And and my agent was like, I put you up for a job where you're going to drive, and you're going to, drive cast and crew. No, drive the key crew. It was a commercial, I remember. And I was like, I'm not ready to drive the grown-ups, like, give me extras, give me people who are judging me. I'm not ready to drive the grown-ups. And I ended up having to do that. And when I got there, it was a vehicle called an Iveco. It was huge. It was a bus. It was a 20-seater, if I'm not mistaken. And now, obviously, the first challenge is getting used to the braking systems, because this is not my mother's little Ford. And I remember that trip was quite eventful, getting used to the brakes, and then also having this big vehicle, so the inertia. So every time you pump the brakes, everyone would go, ah! And it wasn't that bad. They were just being so dramatic. And we went through those, I flew through humps because we needed to be on set at a particular time. And I needed to get there. So I think the first trip was about 40 kilometers from the production office. And I remember that the driving wasn't the worst thing on the day. My driving was appalling at that time because I didn't have much practice, but I was a great PA. I was a fantastic PA. I responded on time. I was on my feet the whole time. There was no department I would not assist, whether it be the equipment was heavy. I would carry tracks, I would carry dollies, I would do whatever it took to be of assistance and to really make sure that the floor ran efficiently. And because I didn't drive well, my PAing, the thing I knew I could do really well, was diminished. And I remember the AD for the day, I had done something for somebody and someone was like, oh no, love your work, Noms. And the AD in front of everybody just started laughing and went, oh, you're being serious. Why are you lying? And I went to the toilet because they can never see you cry, right? But this is also because I'm a woman, because I'm Black. I cannot resort to tears, or I can never let them see that, I was emotionally affected, because when I entered the industry, you had to be tough as nails. You had to be rough. A month before that, I was a childminder, and I'd asked for a lift from one of the drivers who had gotten into some road rage spat with a driver that was next to him, and this guy pulled out a gun. And I was traumatized, right? Yeah. But coming back to set the following day, I remember one of the actresses was like, no, if those type of things scare you, then this is not the industry for you.
My God.
So I had that mentality, and I went to the toilet, and I was like a sprinkler. I cried. And one of the grips, actually a guy I'll never forget, came and fetched me and said, it's lunchtime. You will hold your head up high or else your tiara will fall. You will eat in front of them, because tomorrow they will be looking to you for solutions. They will be looking to you. Don't let this experience determine who you are in the industry. And it was so weird. I was shunned the whole day by different people. I mean, there was a guy that I had assisted on a shoot for free a week prior to that, and now on this job, had no idea who I was, couldn't remember my name. And so it was quite important because, that experience for me taught me that the sum total of my value or my worth isn't the job, isn't things that physically happen. It's my energy, it's my spirit, it's what I contribute. I will have bad days. I will fail. I will be out of my depth. But once we understand that our value is more than just, oh, you're only as good as your last job. I get that. But is that really true? Is
It's
it?
not.
Is it? Yeah, so that was the first experience. And lately, I have had a moment where I was like, do we do this or do we not? So the kind of conditions, like I guess this speaks to more labor, right? The kind of conditions that we endure as filmmakers is the fact that you, unlike other employees, you take a job on, you have no guarantee as to whether or not you'll be paid. And then you wrap the job, and then a week goes by and the producers don't say anything to you. And then 2 weeks go by and you're wondering, and you have to live with that insecurity of, will I ever get paid? And to have to live with that, but you've provided yourself with the time and the transport to get there, and you've given your all. When you were called on set to perform a particular job, you did it on time, but when your remuneration is supposed to come, now that's no longer the case. So those are just one of the things that have made, or rather inspired me to start looking at solutions to this problem. But yeah, it got me considering my position and whether or not I really wanted to live this way and hang at the mercy of an accountant who needed to remember to hit that button to release payments. That's not okay.
Yeah, of course. So congratulations on Sundance. I think it's a remarkable achievement. Getting into Sundance is always fantastic. I had the pleasure of interviewing Prano Bailey-Bond at the UK Film Festival, also screened at Sundance with Censor. It's a fantastic film, highly recommended if you haven't seen it yet. But you got to screen at Sundance as well. However, you didn't get to go because it was virtual this year.
Yep.
So what's that like? Not being able to go to the thing you really want to go to?
It's odd because I've never really quite attended a festival like Sundance, so I don't know what I would be missing, except everyone wants to tell me these wonderful stories that it's like I'm not going to be there physically. So it's thanks for your stories about the snow, but I'm not going to be there.
So, but were you planning on going?
Yes, I was. So I started the moment I knew. I think it was in early December, and 2020, early December last year. Actually, around this time, my producer called me, and I'd just done a night shoot. So I was exhausted, like 6 a.m. and he's calling and I'm like, what's up? Is the world on fire? And he's like, no, we made it into Sundance. So I was super excited, thinking to myself, okay, we're going to really have this mind-blowing international experience where we don't only get to go to another country, but we get to interact with people that love what you do and they do the same thing, and you're going to meet a bunch of, so there was this whole, and I guess more than the physical preparation, it was like the mental preparation where I was really like psyching myself up to build up to this moment, and it was going to be fantastic. I was going to be on the red carpet and be like everyone else. And then in mid-December, the lockdown really hit. I think it was on the 28th of December. And there was a travel ban, so we couldn't go. And I mean, I had like gone through and I was trying to get my visa sorted and I couldn't get a date and I just didn't understand why. And I was like, this is an emergency. So when that happened, it was greatly disappointing. But there was a lot I learned from Sundance being virtual this year. Firstly, they built this amazing technology that allowed you to have this interactive VR experience. So you could attend the parties and you could be there almost physically. with your body as an avatar. And they had these different breakaway rooms and these cinemas that you could go to, but you could interact with people and speak to them as if you were there, you know.
Nice.
Yeah, that was fantastic. And just to see the possibilities that existed, you know, with this new technology, and how it was, the experience of it, not all of it was lost, but there's a special edge to it, because you were now not only experiencing cinema, but, you know, being in this completely, like, this virtual world. And I mean, it was quite timely looking at, you know, the rebranding of Facebook and that trajectory and where all of that is going. But I think, you know, with the fourth industrial revolution at the helm, we do need to find different ways of interacting, and that for me was a great save. But besides that, you know, just the kind of the films you're able to watch and that you're able to catch without the physical constraints of having to move from one space physically to be in another is also, I mean, it's fantastic. I was able to watch with my whole family. You know, I was able to indulge them, because the other thing about, you know, being a filmmaker in a region like South Africa that people assume doesn't have a huge market is the issue of access, right? So with a lot of international filmmakers having access to different types of films and then sort of standing on the shoulders of those filmmakers because they know what's out, it becomes a bit of a struggle for us here to be able to access those films, to be able to screen them, to be able to download them. And it becomes a matter of, you know, we just haven't seen the films. We don't know where to get them, and we don't know how to go. But now that we've got this, and I mean, everything is changing. Netflix is also doing some interesting things in sub-Saharan Africa, just shifting that notion of not having that kind of access has allowed us, or rather has inspired our filmmaking to, you know, step it up a notch. But also not just that. We're no longer speaking into a black hole. So we're no longer speaking to an audience that kind of isn't there. We're no longer making assumptions about what we think the global market would like, because we're watching the same films now. We see what you guys are up to. And so and so we're able to communicate those ideas better. Like, one of the things that we did in Five Tiger, this wasn't something that was quite deliberate at first, but then we saw the benefits of it, is the language issue, because understanding our audiences from a demographic point of view says that you've got a huge chunk of Zulu language speakers, then you've got English language, you know, and so you're trying to create, not for people in general, or rather not looking at your audiences from a psychographic point of view in terms of their interaction with content, but from a demographic, which is quite limiting at this point in time. But we limited, I mean, a lot of what was communicated in Five Tiger was nonverbal. And so we realized that the way to get through these barriers and these challenges is to go, you know, the slightly more taciturn route, to be able to communicate exactly what's happening without needing to use, you know, dialogue. And now with other, you know, countries and other filmmakers, this is something that seems to be a no-brainer. But with us, because our local languages hinge so much on the lyricism of our spoken language, because of erasure, because of our languages being frowned upon, you know, under colonial rule. This was something that is now coming up, and it's become quite important for us to be able to speak our own languages on television, but at the same time create certain barriers, right? So it's dealing with those things and contending with where we are and where the rest of the world is. So Sundance, yes, I would have loved to have been there. I would have loved to have played in the snow. It was fun watching other people do that while I was boiling, because December is like, it's peak summer for us. But yeah, that was quite interesting.
Has Sundance opened any doors for you that you weren't expecting?
Well, I suppose, you know, when a film gets the kind of love it got at Sundance, it then allows you to enter a lot more rooms. And so CenterFrame, the interaction with you guys, for instance, is one of the benefits of having screened at Sundance, because what it does, just it allows your film, it allows you to travel a little bit more, creates a lot more talkability, but I suppose pairs you with like-minded people that perhaps other spaces wouldn't allow you to engage with them in. So I think their effects it's not quite like you landed $1 million production deal and this was but they're more they're more implicit. They kind of shape and rather, so if I could use the analogy of tributaries contributing to this one big river, Sundance is one of those tributaries that collects all these minerals and collects all the goodness and different particular type of like wildlife and just funnels them into the grand idea, which is, I suppose, the evolution of, African cinema or whatever it is. I'll figure it out later.
All right. Well, my last question, what's coming up for you? What's in the works for you?
So quite a lot that I've signed NDAs on, so I can't go into it. But yes, we're
my favorite acronym, NDA.
I know. You know what? I think it's just about jinxing it. I suppose it is just about jinxing it. I mean, I get the obligation, but sometimes what it is and what I found is that when you speak about a project too early, the satisfaction of having people go, "Oh, that's kind of interesting," drives your serotonin levels more than, actually getting to work and actually doing it. But I am looking at a couple of features. I do want to play a little bit more in the space of short forms because I found that they, especially with regards to audience development, locally and abroad, allow you to be able to, dip your feet in the pool. It's a great litmus test to see what people vibe with. They also can be made quite efficiently. You can be a lot more experimental. So while I have some features that are being written that are all in development and taking their time to brew and ferment and get all the goodness going, I really am looking at creating short form content in the form of feature films. There's that. And then there is the work that I do as well that looks at developing the tech space. So a lot of research. We've got a partnership going with the British Council, research project that my partner and I have coming up for 2022, and that hopefully you guys can be a part of, that just looks at the health and the well-being of filmmakers, and how we begin to tell better stories when we better ourselves. So previously, filmmakers, creatives, and storytellers in general were looked at and revered as being better, should they have some kind of ill mental health. And what organizations like Film and TV Charity that look at really supporting filmmakers with their mental health. And so we're going to be looking at engaging them in order for us to be able to deal with some of the issues that have come up, especially with regards to our triggering past, but really just allowing filmmakers to vent and to be able to tell stories and create from a healthier place, just so that the content we create can lead to a healthier community and environment in general.
Thank you very much, Nomawonga. I really appreciate you coming down. I'm so glad to speak to you in long form, not just in quick chat. I love this. Congratulations again on Sundance. Congratulations on your film, and good luck with your future work. We will be speaking soon.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to engage.